Welcome everybody to Karam's event today for Giving Tuesday. We wanted to have an opportunity to speak with all of you, all of the people that have supported us, especially in this year, but have supported us for many years as we worked to support Syrian refugee communities, Syrian families, Syrian students, and then in this amazing year that we've had in 2025 to be able to continue our work in Turkey as well as begin to set the foundation for our future in Syria. So today we're going to be speaking about two things. I'm going to be giving you an organizational update and talk to you about the work that we've been doing this year so far so that you can all have that update. It's our third time this year doing a community Zoom to be able to give you all updates on what we've been doing and how we're thinking about the work moving forward. Then I'm going to hand it over to Dimitri and Nora, who are going to talk about a report that we created earlier this year called The Journey Home. And we're really proud of this report that talks about how Syrian refugees are thinking about their return, specifically looking at the people that we serve in our Karam community in Turkey and taking the findings from that into actually how we're thinking about our work. So, to again, welcome if you've just joined, and we'll be sharing the recording of this Zoom event after it's completed. So, to start, I wanted to talk to you about how we're thinking about the work and Karam's work. Obviously, since December 8th of last year, when Syria was liberated from the Assad regime, we were able to start thinking about our work in a much more expansive way and in ways that we never imagined would be possible before. So, for the past 14 years, we've been focused on supporting Syrian communities. We actually worked inside Syria for many years before we were no longer able to, and focused our work, as you all know, in Turkey, in both southern Turkey and in Istanbul, since 2013. And so last January 8th, when Syria was liberated, which many people in Syria now this week are celebrating the pathway to liberation daily, as we remember 1 year ago when this impossible thing happened, we were able to think about, okay, what do we do next? How do we, a lot for many years, some of you have even asked me this question about, what would your biggest dream be? And it would be to have Karam in Aleppo, have Karam in Syria. And so when this became a reality, I never thought that that would actually be a reality, and definitely not in my lifetime. And so when this actually became a possibility and became something that we could actually think about, then actually the real work began. So starting in January, we started working very closely with our communities to figure out how people are thinking about return, as well as how are we thinking about Syrian refugee communities in Turkey, because you can't just get up and leave communities that we've been supporting for many years. And then what are we taking with us to Syria? And so these are the biggest questions that we've been thinking about throughout the year. And I've been giving everybody updates throughout the year about this. And since last month, we can say that we've actually started doing these really concrete moves on the ground to take programming into Syria. So, as you can see on this slide, the urgency is really extreme in Syria across all sectors, but we're focused on education. And so thousands of schools have been destroyed and damaged. Over 7,000 schools have been damaged in Syria since 2011. There are over 2.5 million kids that are currently out of school. Only 39% of schools in Aleppo are functioning, and many of the children, if not all of the children, actually require mental health support. So the numbers are staggering. We are doing our best to support as many people as we can, and a lot of other organizations are as well. But we're talking about the country needing billions and billions of dollars to be able to reconstruct their education system and their school system. We can go to the next slide. So right now in Syria, we've been functioning this year in several locations, and we're doing three different things. So here, this map can show you how we're functioning. We worked in southern Syria outside of Damascus on school rehabilitation projects that we did in partnership with other organizations on the ground. And this is why you'll see us having our places on the map near Damascus. And these were actually really important tests for us to be able to first partner with new organizations, as well as look at how do we think about rehabilitating schools. And then in the north, we really want to focus on Aleppo, the Aleppo countryside, and the Idlib countryside. And this is for two reasons. One is because the northern Syria, and especially Aleppo, has not had enough attention on it, and it has had a really extreme amount of the damage that and the destruction through the war. And the second is because our team is still based in Reyhanli, Turkey, which is right on the border where you see that blue dot. And so it makes a lot of sense for us strategically to be working in this area where our team can actually enter now into Syria. They can support the team inside Syria and also go back to Turkey even on the same day. So this made a lot of sense to us. Jinderis in northern Aleppo, that is also on the border, is a location that we've been working in since after the earthquake. And so that area and that school we've actually been doing programming in for since 2000 since 2020, like before the liberation, since 2024, doing the studio work. So that this school is getting us to getting more advanced in Karam Studios program. So the three things that we're doing in Syria right now is the first is that we're actually supporting Syrian refugees to return home. And Dimitri and Nora are going to be speaking extensively about this. This program actually came out of one of the things that came out of the report, which is to know that when we were surveying families and understanding about how people are thinking about return, we realized that many of our Syrian families that we support in Turkey wanted to return but couldn't afford to. So we created the Returns Grant Program. And so we were able to support up until this date 30 families to return to Syria from Turkey. And they're from our Karam Families program. And we hope to actually expand this program next year. But Dimitri and Nora are going to be speaking a lot more about this program and about how it came to be. So we can talk about that in a little bit. But it's a really powerful moment to be able to support refugees to return home. And the second program that we've been working on is the school rehabilitations. And we've done several of these schools so far, like I said before, outside of Damascus, in two locations, as well as we're working on four different schools in northern Syria, in Aleppo and Aleppo countryside. And these rehabilitations, we're actually looking for very specific kinds of schools to work on. We're looking for schools that need their budget to rehabilitate them is around $30,000 or less. So we're talking about schools that have a little what they call compared to Syria is minimal damage, but when you see the videos of what these schools actually look like, you will be in shock. We're talking about schools that don't have windows, don't have doors, don't have electricity, don't have adequate sanitary bathrooms or water or any things that you would actually think of that you could actually have a healthy environment to learn, as well as most schools don't even have proper desks. So many of the schools that we visited actually don't have desks or have half the amount of desks that they need, and all of them are kind of broken, where a lot of Syrian kids are actually sitting on the floor to study. Also, kids don't have books. And so when you go into schools like the ones that we're working in northern Aleppo, and in Aleppo countryside and in Damascus, you're basically taking a school that's serving between like 600, 700 kids to over 1,000 kids, from non-functional to being able to be functional, to even have like a light bulb. One of the schools that we supported with solar panels, teachers started using their projectors for the first time in 10 years. And we're talking about the basic things, but that actually people were without for all of these years. So it really is life-changing to be able to provide these schools with this kind of service and the community right now, especially in schools that we're targeting in the war-torn areas, vulnerable areas, impoverished areas. And so it's actually a really massive impact that happens pretty quickly. And the third thing that we're doing is Karam Caravan, which we're really excited to share with you. And this is what we're taking. We wanted to take what we had learned most from in Turkey, from Karam Studios, and what we knew had a really big impact as well on teenagers, and take this thing that we learned, which is the innovative education program, and actually take it and implement it in a way that we'd never done before. So all of you know about Karam House and how Karam House functions in Turkey, and how we've built this community center that functioned in Reyhanli, in the camps, the earthquake camps in Istanbul, in several different iterations. And we want to take it further and be able to go directly with this program to public schools, also in vulnerable areas that were really destroyed by the war, as well as areas that have a lot of poverty, rural areas. And so we took our Karam house idea, put it on a truck, which you can see here in the last image. We have here the work. It's basically a mobile maker space, and we have new mentors in Syria, and they're partnering with the mentors that we have in Turkey to create this program and take them directly to schools. So here you can see the Karam Caravan. We launched it last month in Damascus, and it was really powerful to take this idea and launch it in the National Library in Damascus and showcase to people what we've been working on all these years. And we actually brought students with us from Turkey and from Syria. Students who had returned to actually showcase their projects in an exhibition, in a panel, and it was unbelievable to show this. And people from Syria, people in Damascus who had never left throughout the whole war, were amazed by what we could do, and we're really talking about how this was a huge opportunity that could be possible for so many Syrian kids. We can go to the next slide. Karam Caravan can serve up to 4,000 kids in 1 year, and you can imagine it going on a route serving different schools. So we're started working now with 3 schools in Aleppo and Aleppo countryside, and we're going to have a 4th school. And we're also actually starting to plan our second caravan that we want to launch in 2026. And we're really excited about this, where kids can actually learn how to do all of the things they learn at Karam House, which is, the coding, the robotics, the design, the teamwork, the collaboration, all these leadership skills, as well as problem solving, which actually is coming at a time and a place where this couldn't be more important. When we've been going into the schools, we know that the digital literacy for these kids is at a very low level. You can imagine that some of these kids, most of them actually have never even used a computer before. And so being able to take these tools, the laser cutter and the 3D printers and the VR sets and the laptops, and taking them into these schools is a really magical experience. And we actually witnessed it going for the first day that Karam Caravan went out in Aleppo countryside when I was there in Syria last month. I mean, kids from neighboring schools were kind of coming to the windows and saying, please come here. Everybody wants to experience this. So we're really excited about the potential of what can happen with this program. And here are some short videos of showing you the exterior and the interior of the caravan. And here we talked a little bit about this with the school restoration, which you can see the solar panels are really important, the desks are really important, and windows and these things that just make school to be able to be a safe space for learning. And here you can see some of the images. This is one school that we visited in Darat Azze, which is a village outside of Aleppo. This school actually right now is under renovation, so this doesn't no longer looks like this. It was really in a really bad state, and even in the mural that you could see on the bottom left, the murals and the walls of this school actually were talking all about for the kids to have awareness and safety because of landmines in the area. So wherever you go, the sadness of the war, the trauma, the school on the outside wall has all of the names of the martyrs who died in that town, just surrounds all of these children daily, and they've grown up with this. And what we're really excited about and looking forward to is to actually change this reality for so many Syrian kids so they can actually start building a sense of normalcy and belonging and safety in a place of learning. And this is something that Syrian kids have not had, and most of these kids in this school have never known in their lives. And I talked also about the journey home, about the families that we've been supporting. We're really proud of this grant because it's actually a very generous grant. You might be hearing about different agencies and large agencies talking about families, Syrian refugee returns. It's coming more from the space of how do we get Syrian refugees to leave the places that they're from, especially when we're talking about European countries, and giving them the bare minimum that sometimes won't even be enough for them to actually move move. Whereas we were looking at it from a different point of view is how do you actually create return with dignity for families and the most stability that we can actually do. So what we found is about between $1,800 to $2,000 is the amount of money that a family would need to actually be able to move all of their belongings from Turkey to Syria, to be able to have a few months of rent or a little bit of money so that they could actually renovate their homes, which some of our families did, have some money to be able to start their lives and have food supplies and get their kids into school with all of their school supplies as well. And so it's been a really amazing thing to watch. We've also continued to work with these families and get updates from them so we can learn from how this grant works and be able to support other people, hopefully in 2026, in even more important ways. And all of this is happening while we're continuing our work in Turkey. It's very important for us to continue our work, to continue to support the families and the scholars and the studios that we've committed to. And so, well, we've done two things that are really important for everybody to know, which is that we are not taking any new Karam families or new Karam scholars starting this year. We're also committing to the families that we have as well as to the scholars that we have. The scholars are the people, the students that are in universities in Turkey until they actually graduate from university. So we want to continue our commitment. And then Karam House in Reyhanli continues to be open and continues to support students with the design studios, and we'll keep that open as well as long as there's a community there to serve. So we're predicting at least into the end of 2026. And we're also added on to our programming, which is teaching kids Arabic. And since we started that right at the beginning, since the liberation, we hired an Arabic teacher, and she's been teaching students in the community Arabic because that is also one of the things that the families have been talking about, which is a restriction for them to be able to return, in that their kids no longer knew Arabic or Arabic well enough to enter schools because of the language barrier. And so we're starting to do that. So when families decide to return, their children can be more prepared to go to school. So with that, this is kind of like the organizational update. I'm going to hand it over to Dimitri, who's our Chief Strategy Officer, and to Nora, who's Karam's Partnerships and Research Specialist, to talk to you about the return home report.
Thanks, Lena. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Just wait for the slides to come up. As Lena shared, our presentation is about sharing the findings from our program participants' return survey. What we wanted to capture wasn't just statistics, but also the emotions, the logistical hurdles, and the programmatic insights that shape people's choices on return. We looked closely at how different groups, we can go to the next slide, Rama, how different groups, the youth and the studios, our families, and scholars are approaching the idea of return. Each has a unique need and perspective, and that's really critical for us to understand. The survey, the data, had a very practical purpose. These insights were meant to guide Karam's internal strategy as well, both how we support participants now in Turkey and how we could continue to grow the program in Syria. The survey went up to over 2,000 Karam participants. We had a strong response rate, nearly 60% overall. That's higher than many other comparable surveys. And the data tells us that these are engaged voices. Most respondents were women, 62%. That's a significant finding in itself. It suggests that women in our programs are particularly invested in shaping the future and in voicing their perspectives. Again, we focused on our three main program groups: families, studios, and scholars. Together, they give us a picture across generations, from caregivers to teenagers who grew up outside of Syria to university students who are thinking about their lives, their careers, what's next. The aim was simple: to understand not just if people want to return, but how ready they are to return emotionally, logistically, generationally. I'm going to hand it over to Nora, who's going to walk us through some of those insights now.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. So we start with probably the most important question in the survey, where all other questions have branched out, and it's the return intentions question. So do you plan or do you intend to return to Syria? And then the responses were split into five. We had undecided, no plans, return after 2025, return in 2025, and returned. Those who have already returned. So, just to reiterate what Dimitri had mentioned previously, that this is an intergenerational survey. So basically, there are three cohorts in Karam, and they are of all like of different age groups. So we've got studios, the youngest age group, and then scholars who are at the university age, and then families who are, the parents of those kids that attend Karam's programs. And each of them had a different perspective on return. So as you can see from like the stacked bars, for families in particular, we can see a 1/3 split. So around like 30%. Some plan to return, others are undecided, and then others say that they will not return. So this reflects also the realities that families face or older generations. So they are mostly concerned about education, caregiving, cost, and the risks of uprooting children. And then moving on to studios, it shows a similar pattern, but even more uncertainty. Actually, more than 60% are undecided or not planning to return. And this is for a very strong reason, actually. If you look at studios, they are usually the age between 12 and 20. So a lot of them have either been born in Turkey or they've lived for most of their life in Turkey. And so Syria is really more or less of an abstract concept for them as a country. And so this makes sense because they don't really remember Syria, and their sense of home is more so rooted in Turkey. And then we have the scholars cohort who are at university age. So they do stand out because 54% of them said that they do plan to return. And this is the highest proportion across all the groups. And 8% have already returned. So scholars or those at the university age link return to education, career opportunities, and a desire to build Syria. So they see themselves as potential contributors. So what this chart shows is not just return intentions, but generational distance. So the older the cohort, the more the decision is shaped by stability and family responsibilities. And then the younger the cohort, especially those raised entirely in Turkey, return feels more or less abstract, unknown, or risky. And then we have the university youth, and they bridge those two worlds. They are hopeful, but also very much pragmatic. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So motivations to return, we've got the, top three reasons on why our respondents want to return to Syria. There's family reunification. Many respondents still have close relatives in Syria, and return is strong, and it's the desire to return is strong, and it's tied to repairing family fragmentation caused by displacement, and then the desire to rebuild Syria. There is generally a noticeable moral drive among respondents, especially youth and scholars who want to apply their education and skills in reconstruction efforts. We've had a lot of testimonies and quotes within the survey that actually reaffirm this. And then the rising cost of living in Turkey is also pushing people out. So economic pressure is one of the strongest push factors, particularly rent, education, and basic needs. So people are also they are mostly returning to Aleppo, Idlib, and Homs. They have the strongest ties there. So they show a particularly strong emotional tie to those three provinces. Key barriers. So for the key barriers to return, the top three barriers across all cohorts housing insecurity, financial cost, and school continuity. So as you can see, these were also some of the push factors as well. But again, these are also reasons why the respondents aren't returning. And for housing insecurity in particular, we asked a question on the extent of the damage of a person's home. And those whose home was even partially damaged showed hesitation in returning because, it's still unlivable, even though they do own a home. But if it's still partially damaged, there is no hope for return. And again, for the financial cost, as Lena has mentioned, like the cost of returning is also a major hindrance, which Karam is trying to support as much as possible right now. School continuity is another issue because for education, it's still very much unclear on how, whether or not if a student is returning from Turkey to Syria, how is that going to be possible, and whether the education establishments in Syria are able to accept this? How is the process, and etc. So again, back to the cohorts and the differences between the families and the studios and the scholars in age. So for families, it's mostly about travel costs and school disruption. And then for studios, who are the younger kids, it's about university access and work obligations. And then for scholars who are at the university age, again, it's also academic continuity and unstable infrastructure. And when we say infrastructure, this doesn't necessarily mean only like stones or homes or buildings. It also means internet, it means electricity, it means, water. So all these things that do support the presence of a young person are still also pretty much unstable at the moment and are causing a hindrance. Next slide, please. So this question in particular, I would say, is probably one of the questions that made Karam's report stand out compared to other literature. We asked the question, we asked our respondents, how do you feel about returning to Syria? And this is something that not a lot of people ask Syrians, by the way. So we did ask them. And again, there is a difference between the generational, like intergenerational groups. For families, the predominant emotion would be anxiety because it's again tied to caregiving, cost, and school disruption. Their concerns are practical. So, and then moving on to studios, the predominant emotions would be anxiety and uncertainty. Because again, many have no personal memory of Syria. They were either too young, they came to Turkey as toddlers, or they were born there. For scholars, they are more hopeful. They're driven by education, career, and rebuilding Syria. So across all three cohorts in different forms, there is one shared emotional driver. It's the adaptation anxiety, the fear of being unable to reestablish familiarity, stability, and belonging. So even though each program has its own emotional profile, the underlying story is the same. Return isn't only about safety or legality, it's about the emotional readiness to rebuild a sense of home. And this is something that many other surveys have missed out on, and I'm happy to say that, like, I think Karam is like we touched on this, and we really think that this is important. So these program level emotions point us toward the bigger question: what's driving those feelings across all cohorts? Next slide, please. So as I said, the predominant emotion would be across all cohorts would be adaptation anxiety, the fear of starting from zero, navigating an unfamiliar Syria, and losing existing stability in Turkey. Primary emotional barrier identified across families, studios, and scholars. And then the second reason for how they're feeling the way they're feeling is loss of social anchors. These are, by the way, all compiled through testimonies. So, because following the question of how do you feel, we also ask them, why do you feel this way? So, we basically compiled this from all the whys as well. So loss of social anchors, youth fear losing friendships, schools, and community networks built over the years. A lot of them have mentioned, a lot of our respondents mentioned that, I have my school, I have my friends, I have my community in Turkey. It's going to be very difficult for me to, start over. And it's especially acute among studios, the younger kids, no memory of Syria, and scholars who are invested in future pathways in Turkey. And then the uncertainty about basic life conditions, so concerns about services, education, safety, and economic instability. So this drives elevated anxiety in families mostly, who are the heads of household. And then emotional distance from Syria. A large portion of youth describe Syria as an unknown emotional landscape, not a home they remember. This is mostly dominant in studios, the students who are between the ages of 12 till 18 or 20. And this creates hesitation rooted not in rejection, but in emotional disorientation. So hope exists, but it's conditional. Scholars, university-age students, show cautious optimism tied to future careers, rebuilding efforts, and long-term stability. But one thing for sure, if there is hope, it's usually more future-focused. It's more about potential. So it's not really present-focused. And back to you, Dimitri.
Thank you, Nora. When we analyzed our data, one finding really jumped out. It's what we now call the Karam effect. Across our programs, people were far more likely to say they plan to return to Syria than in other studies. About a third of Karam leaders, our program graduates, plan to return. That's nearly double what we see in other organizational surveys. And even our younger studios participants show higher intent. This isn't just about numbers, it's about mindset. When people feel supported and capable, they start believing in their own ability to rebuild. That's what Karam does. That's the Karam effect. It turns hope into confidence. Next slide, please. The Karam effect shows what happens when education, belonging, community come together. Confidence builds intent. Belonging turns anxiety into stability, and learning transforms experience into purpose. You see from one of our scholars in Gaziantep, I feel ready to go back because I can help others and build a future here. That's the shift we see. People no longer just dream of returning, but they begin to prepare for it. Next slide. When we compare our findings with the UN, IRC, and other organizations, Karam's data doesn't just confirm theirs, but it adds something new. We have a proportionally higher number of women, again, 60% of our respondents participating in the survey, and by virtue of our programs have a multi-generational dimension to our data, meaning we're hearing voices often missed in other surveys. And that's critical. That's critical to the return of Syria. So, why others track safety and economics, we're measuring confidence, belonging, and emotional readiness. And I think that's important to Syria, but it's also important to us programmatically. So together, our survey with the other surveys paint a fuller picture. Karam's data adds the human layer. It's the why. It's a temperature reading behind the numbers of return. Next slide, please. When people talk about what they need to feel ready, three things rise to the top: information, so understanding systems, schools, documentation that's necessary; practical support, things like housing, travel, language, the Arabic proficiency that Lena was talking about; and emotional readiness, mentoring, storytelling about Syria. What is it like to go? imagining a future back in Syria. So beyond the logistics, it's about helping people grow that confidence and a sense of home even before they make that journey. Next slide. So, what's next for us? Well, you hear about the amazing work that we're starting to do in Syria, but there's a few ideas that we're still working on in Turkey. It's testing that preparedness, having a feel about how ready they are to return. Thinking about workshops led by other people who have already returned to lend the sense of what is tangible, what's real, and updating program content to fit what life is in Syria today. And expanding storytelling to help youth connect identity to purpose. There's a motivation to going back. To close, this is what it means for our mission. Return isn't yes or no decision, it's a journey, it's readiness. It's not about just pressure or push that determine the success, but a desire. For us as humanitarian groups, that means focusing on rebuilding, not just relief, but something that's sustainable and real and represents a foundation. For government, it means supporting voluntary and circular return. It's a journey. And for friends and donors like all of you, it means investing in readiness, in people who are growing into future leaders. Our job isn't to send people home or force people to return to Syria. It's to prepare them emotionally, educationally, and practically so when they do return, they're ready to help rebuild their communities, their lives, their countries. That's the Karam effect in action, and that's what has made your support possible. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dimitri and Nora, for this great presentation. So we want to leave some space for Q&A. I just wanted to say before we open it up, and if you have any questions, please, you can raise your hand, you can unmute, you can also put it in the chat. But I wanted to just say to close out this day, I mean, we know that it's Giving Tuesday, so we appreciate everybody's support. We appreciate you sharing with your friends and family and your networks about Karam's work at this end of year. It's really imperative. As you can see, we're trying to do a lot and we're trying to kind of juggle this, supporting the people that we are committed to in Turkey while growing our work in Syria. When we're showing this kind of work to government officials, to education directorates, the question becomes like, we need 5 caravans, we need 10 caravans, we need to be doing 20 schools. And so the idea of, which might have been before a question of, how do you grow the work? Right now, that how is actually not even a question because Syria, there's just so much to do and so many people to support in this very specific way that we want to do it, which does not exist across the entire country. And so in order to be able to do this, we need everybody's support. So the more that you can support us and actually tell your friends and networks about us, we would be very, very grateful. We do have a match happening today on Giving Tuesday, up to $50,000. We have a private donor who is matching donations throughout from Thanksgiving to today is the last day for that. And so if you wanted to support on that link, it will go towards that match. The journey home is something really important that we've been talking about this entire year, and it'll probably be continuing to go through next year. It's a very historic moment, not just for Syrians, but really globally. All of you who have supported Syrians all this time, and people who've supported refugees and displaced people, you know that this story doesn't usually end with a return. I know so many of you who've given to Syrians. You gave in the spirit of we want to help them where we are. We were building programs for Syrians where they were knowing that they probably will never go back home. And now to know that we could potentially have millions of people return. Already over 2 million people have returned to Syria from both internally displaced and refugees, and that number will grow as the country begins to stand on its own 2 feet. So this idea of being able to help this story of return is a historic one. I hope that one day you'll be able to join us and visit Syria and see it because it's a very powerful experience to see the resilience of the people. I'm watching people really create something out of nothing, people putting together a couple of walls and covering their ceiling with a tent that they brought with them just to be able to be home. A lot of people telling us that if you build the school, we'll come back, even if we have to live on a tent on our land, because the most important thing is that there's a place for our kids to go to school. And a really powerful story happened when we had our event, the Makers of Tomorrow, in the National Library in Damascus, where one of our speakers, his name is Abdul Wahab Umaira, and he is a young man who we're a big fan of his, and he grew up out in the suburbs of Damascus, one of the suburbs, Jobar, that was completely destroyed by the war. He became a refugee, like so many of the kids that we've supported all throughout these years. He became displaced and then a refugee in southern Turkey in a camp and moved from the camp to Chicago, where he was a refugee. And then he went from there and applied to Stanford and went to Stanford on a full ride and studied computer engineering and graduated a few years ago. And so since the liberation, when he was 13, he was the youngest inventor in Syria. And when he was 14, after the revolution started, he was detained with his family, with all of the men in his family at 14 years old, to show like what this regime did with their most promising people, their youth. And so he came to our Makers of Tomorrow event and spoke to the audience because now Abdul Wahab is actually the head of AI for the Ministry of Communications in Syria. He's not even 30 years old. And when he told his story about how much he struggled and how he went from place to place and he never really belonged and how hard he had to work to get to where he is, he said at the end of his story, and everybody was so moved, and he said at the end of the story, this struggle, I could have reduced 3 or 4 years of this struggle from my life if I had a place like Karam House. And we were just, so moved by that because it is true. The kids that come through our program are able to shift their lives, and it's something that we've learned how to do over these years, and we're really proud of. And so I can't even imagine what the impact and the capacity will be when we're able to unleash all of this energy into public schools that have never seen this kind of investment, have never seen this kind of care and nurturing that we want to do. And so I want to leave you with that story and open it up for questions now. Oh, and the last thing is that one of the things that we're doing also is we're bringing back elements from our store. So we have our Cyber Monday special. We've extended it to Giving Tuesday, and so these are scarves, very special scarves from Aleppo, which I can't show you really well because of my background. But they are silk scarves from, there's only a few artisans left in Aleppo who make these handmade silk screen scarves. So we have a lot of colors on our website. If you want to buy them, they make really perfect gifts. I brought them with me from Aleppo, and the pouches are also handmade by artisans in Syria. We're looking at ways of how do we support the local economy and how do we bring back the crafts and the kind of knowledge that really died out during the war because people just left, and trying to invest in that local knowledge and local heritage as well. So this is one of our first things that we're doing, and you'll find them on our store. So we have about 12 minutes left, and so if anybody has any questions, please, go ahead.
I have a question, Linda Purcell. With the schools that are being established, is it hard to find teachers? And are any of the scholars coming back and teaching in the classroom?
That's a great question. Yes, it is hard. Teaching and teaching training is something that's really important to the country right now, and they do need to do this at scale. There are teachers that are there, but we need to increase the capacity of the teachers and also training the teachers. We also have questions with the Ministry of Education on the actual curriculum. So everything that we're doing is informal education. We're adding on to what's the school, so we're not like coming in the regular school day, but we are very interested in how do we actually support the government and when they're going to start having the work on actually evolving and advancing the curriculum. In terms of scholars, yes, I'm really glad you brought this up, Linda. We don't have scholars who are teaching in schools yet, but two of our mentors right now in Aleppo are actually Karam scholars who graduated in Turkey and returned. And we do have other scholars who have returned. We've also had team members. Our team member Mahmoud moved from Turkey to Aleppo to be the lead mentor, and now is training and onboarding and helping the new four mentors begin to teach as well and kind of Karam Caravan. We also have had team members take other opportunities in Syria. So we are encouraging as many people as we can within our community to take on new roles and support our scholars also on the return because we think that this is a huge investment that exists outside the country, and we would love to have them come back to Syria and help rebuild.
Great.
Carrie is asking, do we have activists in the Boston area? What do you mean by activists? And you can unmute if you'd like. Friends of Karam. Yes, we do. And I actually come to Boston at least once a year. Actually, Dimitri is based in Boston as well as Megan. We have a board member out, Amar Salim, and other friends of Karam. So if you want to reach out to us, definitely we have a big Boston base. And we're planning to have an event in Boston sometime in 2026, hopefully in the spring. So we should put your name on so you will know about it. We'd always need more friends. So if you have friends in mind, please spread the word. Anybody else have any questions? Miriam,
Oh,
are you
Hi.
considering remote volunteer Arabic teachers? We haven't thought about that. We worked with paper airplanes on volunteer English teaching to refugees, but the Arabic, I don't think we've thought about that. And that's a great idea because Arabic, especially for the kids in Turkey and the students in Turkey, is critical. If you have ideas on this, we'd love to connect with you on that.
Hi, Lena. Yeah, sure. Another follow-up question is about laptops. Did you consider volunteering or actually donating refurbished laptops? Because this is something that an NGO is doing in Lebanon, and they're preparing at least, I don't know, over 60 schools, public schools with labs where they set up the laptops, they set up the labs with the refurbished laptops, and they leave it there for the students to use.
Is that in
So this
Lebanon
is,
or in Syria?
yeah, that's in Lebanon actually. Just,
Yeah.
just sharing right now, but we can definitely connect afterwards and further
Yeah,
discuss.
we would love that. I mean, we've not had support on a lap like donated laptops. We need as many laptops as we can get. So if we could connect on that, that would be amazing. We're being very resourceful when when we're able to close down operations in Turkey. This stuff is moving into storage into Rayhanli,
Of
moving into
course.
storage into Syria. We're furnishing offices from this office and moving laptops and moving equipment. And so doing our best to extend everything and stretch it as far as we can. But laptops, especially when young people are using them, we go through them pretty quickly. They're not expensive, but we would need them at a big number.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? Well, if you have any questions, you know where to reach us, you know how to get to us. We'd love to hear from you. We really thought this would be a good opportunity to speak to everybody before the end of the year, especially on Giving Tuesday and giving you this update. But we hope to do this periodically because things are still continuing to change in Syria. We really appreciate everybody's support and grateful for everything that you've done for Karam over the years, and hope you will watch us as we continue to grow in these very exciting ways. I really appreciate you joining on a Tuesday, and we're just like are very grateful to you all. Thank you for supporting us.
thank
Thank
you for your
you.
work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.